Hi, and welcome to the sewing site featuring aniline patterns. We have a really exciting new pattern available to you that's free. It's our free batwing mask pattern. And it's called a batwing mask pattern for a really simple reason, and that's just because the design of it actually looks like a little bat. So there are some really big differences between this pattern and some of the other ones that you may have been using, some of the other popular patterns that are, pretty easily available online right now, many of them for free. And the biggest benefit to this pattern over some of those other ones are that it does not have a seam that runs from the nose down to the chin. If we're trying our best to filter out particles and make sure that we create as good of a barrier as we can between ourselves and the potentially polluted air outside of our mask, then it makes sense to not want to poke additional holes down the center of your mask if you can avoid it. And so what this particular pattern will allow you to do is sew a dart for the nose area, darts that frame the chin, and it'll give you a really, really good fit. And you can also have an optional pocket insert to insert a filter, or you can put optional nose wire if you want an even better fit, to pinch and to frame the nose. So a lot of really great features that can make you a lot more comfortable when you talk. I see people out when I go to the grocery store, when my kids were in school, that the masks don't fit their faces. And as they talk or as their children talk, the mask is falling down their face and underneath their nose and constantly adjusting it and pulling it up. This mask pattern is so easy and is so simple to do with a standard sewing machine. Give it a try. So there are a couple of things that you can do to improve the fit of the pattern. The first thing is to use the proper size. This pattern comes in child sizes, a woman's size, and a man size. The main difference between each of them isn't just the width of it, but it's also the height of it from the tip of the nose to the chin. So this is a child's pattern that I did for my son. And so if I put it on my face, you're gonna notice that when I try to talk, my chin is kind of starting to almost peek out along the bottom. And what will happen over time is this will start to go down on my nose, and I'm gonna have to adjust it. If I'm sending my kids to school, which they're in EDL right now, but that's neither here nor there, but if I'm sending them to school, I wanna make sure that they don't have to constantly adjust their mask, because it defeats the purpose if they're constantly having their hands in their face. I have a kindergartner and a first grader, so struggle's real. So for this one, this is actually the women's size that fits me properly. You can see that when I put it against my face, I have enough room to talk here along my chin. It's not going to come off. I can go ahead and pinch this nose wire to have an even more comfortable, tighter fit, and it fits me properly. So if you need additional length, if you maybe have a longer nose to chin measurement than is in the pattern, go ahead and just size up to maybe the men's height. If you're using the women's sizes, if you have an older child, you can maybe go up to the women's size. And it's really that length between the nose and the chin that you're looking to increase. Another thing is that if you've been making masks with elastic, whether it be, 1/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch, whatever it is that you've been using, and you have not discovered the beauty that is knit fabric strips, use those. Use those instead. I like to cut them about 1 inch thick and cutting it against the grain. And so of course you have the direction of greatest stretch that allows the ear straps, that's what it's called, the technical term for it, the ear strap, to stretch so that it can better mold to your model. Now, if you're selling masks and you're sending these out, I would recommend that you cut the fabric strips a little bit longer and don't tie them in a knot, and let your customer do that, because it'll allow them to have the best fit for their particular face. And so that's always, in my opinion, the best way to handle that. But really excited about this one. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, The link to the free pattern is in the description, and so we'll go through how to do the 2-layer version without a area to insert a filter. We'll do one with the filter insert pocket. We'll do one with nose wire and without nose wire. Your fabric can be either 100% cotton, you can use knit fabric blends. Just make sure that if it's knit fabric, it is a stable knit and it has good recovery because you don't need it to stretch out, right? That also defeats the purpose if you have a stretched out mask. And I think that's it. So let's go ahead and get started. If you're going to add the option for a pocket insert, what you're going to want to do is you are going to want to place your piece right side down and fold the outside edges in 1/4 inch and press it. And just make sure that you press it really well, and then you're going to fold it in another 1/4 inch and press it again. Try not to burn your fingers. All right, and then go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. I love these sewing gauges. It makes it so easy to measure accurately and make sure that hems or folds are consistent. Pressing is so important for these masks, and it just really helps to have a really nice crisp finish. And then you're going to go ahead and take that and you're going to top stitch it along the inner edge of those folds that you did. And so now you're going to go to sewing the dart. And so we have a non-pocket version here that's pictured with 2 mirrored pieces, but you're going to want to sew the corresponding dart. So fold the pattern piece in half and pin together the nose dart, seen right here. And you're going to do the same thing on both your fabric pieces, whether or not you have the non-pocket version or the pocket version. And so go ahead and pin both of the chin darts together as well. Just like that, they should line up perfectly. You have 2 different patterns available. You have one available that has a 1/4 inch seam allowance and another that has a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Since I understand that people have different preferences, this year I'm doing the 1/4 inch pattern, although again, they're exactly the same except for the different seam allowances that are taken into consideration. And the allowances are, of course, included in the pattern pieces as they're labeled. All right, and do the same thing to your second piece. Make sure you take the time to line these up really well, just to make sure that your both your front and back pieces are symmetrical. All right. There you go, and then take those to your sewing machine and sew up those darts on both pieces. All right, so now we have them sewn up and we are going to neaten our edges with our pinking shears. Man, I love pinking shears. You certainly don't have to use this if you're using knit fabric, as knit fabric doesn't fray, but because I used a straight stitch on these dart seams and on all the seams in this pattern and in this tutorial, you want to make sure that you use your pinking shears if possible. If not, you could also reinforce with a zigzag stitch, but honestly, the pinking shears are really the easiest option. And it helps to reduce bulk also at your seams. All right, just like that. I feel like seams with pinking shears, after you've done it, they just look really satisfying, but maybe it's just me. All right, and so turn your pieces right side out, and then you're going to lay them on top of one another, right sides together, and pin them at the nose dart and at both of the chin darts. Obviously, the inner piece, the inside piece, is going to look a little bit different if you're doing the version that allows for a pocket, which we'll go ahead and show you in one of the next slides. And pin it at, again, both chin darts, and then we're going to do also the outer edges of the mask. Okay, line that up right. I have some pins here that I don't know if you can see, but they're a little crooked, and they're crooked because they were actually pins that my mom had. And unfortunately she's no longer with us, but I can't bear to, they're kind of dull, but I still can't seem to throw them out and replace them. But just in case you don't think I'm strange for my bent pins that I use. All right, so now we're going to sew all around the outer edges. Okay, and so this is the version pictured that has the pocket option, and you're going to sew along the top and along the bottom edges. Okay, so now for adding a nose wire. If you're going to add a nose wire, I recommend that you get about 20 gauge wire and measure along the top from the pocket insert from edge to edge, and go ahead and use twice that length and cut your wire. And then what I like to do is twist it so that it reinforces it. Now you can use a heavier gauge wire if you would like, of course. However, it makes it a little bit more difficult to fold the edges into a loop, which we're going to do here in a moment to prevent that wire from poking your face. It is important to curve the edge. So this rounded edge, we don't really have to worry about that because it's already rounded. But this other edge on this right-hand side, you're going to need to curve that in. I trim off the excess here to make sure that both wires are even, and then take a pair of tweezers. These are actually Cricut tweezers, but that doesn't matter. And go ahead and fold it in to create a loop to try to mask that raw edge of the wire. And so now you're going to line it up with the center nose dart, and you're going to go ahead and pin it in place as best as you can within the seam allowance that you have used. Just pin it so that it stays in place as well as possible. One pin along the bottom, one pin along the top. Wire can be pretty finicky, so it shifts really easily, so just make sure that you pin it very well. And then you can pin it on either end. Okay, now the other end. I think mine's going to be a little lopsided, but that's all right. As long as it covers the bridge of the nose, that's really the main part that you're looking for. And then go ahead, and I'm just going to create some slip stitches along the top and the seam allowance to make sure that it stays in place. And so now that that is secured in place with just some slip stitches, I'm going to go ahead and turn it right side out. And it's a little tricky to not bend the wire too much, but can be done. And then now press out your seams. And we're going to take this to the iron in just a second to make sure that we have those seams pressed really well. Okay, perfect. And even out your wire along the nose. Okay, great. So now after we iron, we're going to top stitch along the top edge and the bottom edge of the entire mask. Okay, so for the non-pocket option, you're going to go ahead and sew both pieces together along the top edge and again the bottom edge, and then use your pinking shears again to neaten the edges to prevent fraying. If you're using knit fabric, you can skip this step. This again helps to reduce the bulk at the seams, which makes our top stitching a lot easier. Let's hope I don't cut my finger here. I think I'm pretty good. All right, now the bottom edge. You know, there's something really neat about sewing a face mask and giving it to family and then admiring how good your sewing is. So really try to take all of these steps if you're able to and you have the time to. It really will elevate your finished product. All right, great. And there you go. And then now we're going to go ahead and turn it right side out through the open sides here. We can separate it. Okay. Pull it right side out, and then you're going to press out the seams. Just like that. You can use your finger, you can use a tool that you have to press out the seams, whatever is easier for you and works better for you. All right, great. Just like that. And we are ready to top stitch. Well, almost ready to top stitch. First, we need to press our seams. Make sure that it's well pressed. It's going to make your top stitching a lot easier. And when you press your seams, it also ensures that when you launder your masks or your garments in general, that it retains that memory of those seams. So it helps for the finished product every time you launder it as well. And you're going to press both versions, whether or not you're doing a pocket or a non-pocket version. Okay, just like that. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and do the earband casing. So for the non-pocket version, you are going to fold the outer edges in 1/4 of an inch on both the top and the bottom pieces, the outer and the inside pieces, and fold it in 1/4 of an inch and pin it in place. This can be a little bit of a finicky step. Now, you don't have to take this step. You could also just sew with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance from the outer edge and then use your pinking shears to trim that. But this just has such a nice finish when you actually take the time to fold these edges in and pin it in place and do it this way. But again, you can certainly modify to whatever method that you feel more comfortable, but I certainly prefer this one. This is the child's version, so rest assured that the women and adult versions are a little bit easier because they're a little bit bigger. But then go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. And just take your time. Sometimes I can't decide if it's easier to do one side at a time or easier to do both sides at the same time. Okay, and then after this, we're going to go ahead and press it to make sure that it makes our top stitching a lot easier, because remember, we still have not top stitched the edge of this mask.
Perfect. So now we're going to top stitch all the way around the entire mask, and this is what it is going to look like. And so now we're going to fold each outer edge in 1/2 inch and pin it in place, and this will be our elastic casing. And we're going to be sewing with a straight stitch along the edge, the inner edge of that casing, to create as much room as possible for our elastic or our knit strip bands to be threaded through. There you go. And now, this is what your final version will look like. So you can see our elastic casing is able to be opened up, and we can thread our elastic through that. Okay, so the earband casing here for the pocket version, you're going to go ahead and top stitch the top and bottom of the mask, keeping the sides open, and now you're going to turn it right side down, fold the outer edges in 1/4 inch, and press it. And make sure that you press it well. And then you're going to fold it in again 1/2 inch to create your casing. And again, press it. You're going to do the same thing to the other side. And then after this, we're going to top stitch that ear casing down. First 1/4 inch, and then 1/2 inch. And to now top stitch those. And this is what the final version of the pocket version will look like. All right, so now it's time to install the ear loops. You can use either elastic, but I prefer 1-inch strips of knit fabric, and you're going to cut it across the grain so that the greatest stretch is going in the longest direction of the piece of fabric, and go ahead and just thread it through the ear loops. It's going to allow for really, really good comfort, really great stretch. This here, what I'm using is double brush polyester. However, you can use a cotton lycra. It'll be a little bit stiffer typically for cotton lycra. And you can use a jersey, you can use old t-shirts. Make sure that it's something that has a decent recovery on. You don't want something that's just going to stretch out like a lot of rayon spandex blends. And so I threaded mine through with a safety pin, and then go ahead and tie off each end. If you want to cut these strips a little bit longer, you can certainly do that, so you don't have to worry about putting the knot close to the end. The benefit of putting in a close knot is that you don't have a lot of bulk, so that you can easily pull the knot to the inside of the ear loop casing, and you won't be able to have, or you won't need to have that knot kind of resting on your ear. It'll be within the fabric of the mask. All right, and pull those knots tight, and you are done. Finished, complete.